This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Welcome everybody. I got Jeff here today. Jeff Glauser, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Glauser, you got it.
Glauser, awesome. You down in Florida? I went to college in Orlando.
Nice. Yes, I'm in Jacksonville, and then I also went to grad school in Miami. So you kind of split the difference there in Orlando.
Yeah, sure. All I remember about Jacksonville is the beaches were really, really wide. Like by the time you stepped onto the sand, I felt like I had to walk 300 yards before I got to the water.
Yes. Well, we take pride on getting some extra exercise when you want to relax at the beach.
You spend much time on the coast there on the beach?
Yeah, especially this time of the year. It definitely helps to get the kids out and keep them occupied, and make sure that they're not going stir crazy at home. So it's a win-win situation there.
That's awesome. How old are your kids?
I have a 12-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy who will be 8 in August.
A 7-year-old boy, cool. I've got a 9-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, 12 months apart.
You're right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the boy I can totally relate to, but like, tell me about the last 3 years of having a daughter. Like, I'm starting to get a little bit of that. Like, I don't know if dad can have this conversation as well as mom can have this conversation type of conversations.
Yeah, you get ready to brace yourself. Yeah, you get some challenging discussions for sure.
Yeah, what's 9 to 12 been like? I mean, you go from elementary school to middle school.
It was elementary to middle. I mean, in our situation, it was also kind of a tough transitionary period for her as well. So it was right around the time, it was 4 years ago when we got, her mom and I got separated.
Okay.
So that kind of increased some of the challenges that she was facing. She's not typically one that's good with change in the first place. So having that adapting period was a bit of a struggle. And then when I began dating and then eventually moving in and then eventually marrying my now wife, certain challenges and pitfalls when it came to that as well. But it's all part of the adjusting phase. And one of the things that I've always encouraged my children to do is if something's bothering you, never be afraid to address it to me. There's nothing that you're going to say that's going to completely offend me, especially if it's something that's bothering you. And it's always better to at least put it out there, regardless of how it might be taken, than to bottle it up and let it fester and have to deal with a much more complicated conversation down the road.
Dude, what you're saying about the way it might be taken, I've been over the last 6 months particularly really focused on convincing my kids that I've earned the benefit of the doubt, that I'm a reasonable person, that I'm going to, whatever you say, give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm going to behave reasonably in response. And it sounds like you're saying that in different words, the same thing. How
did they take that? Have they agreed?
They have, I think. You get all caught up in a circumstance and they forget, but we take a couple deep breaths and say, hey, remember, I'm a pretty reasonable person. Like I'm never gonna do something that's super reactionary. So whatever it is, just out with it, because I promise it's better that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and now, so you've had a very active last 5 years. It sounds like you've transitioned your work. You've gone through divorce and managing a relationship with your kids throughout that period, and then introducing a new female influence in the form of your girlfriend, fiance, wife. I can relate to that because my parents got divorced when I was 7, 8, and then remarried, and then they both got divorced again when I was in high school or college-ish, and then one of them got remarried again. So I hope that they've settled in that and that everything is on a growth trajectory for you. But tell me about your profession. In the last couple of years, you've kind of transitioned to working from home. What were you doing? What are you doing now?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Tyler, where the last several years have certainly not been boring. There's been a lot in flux. It's been, I'd say, the biggest growth period of my life, and obviously a very impactful period of my children's lives, getting front row seats of all these changes, and mostly for the better, because it's been really a theme of growth in many ways. What I have discovered with a lot of the challenges and obstacles that I'd had to face leading up to that period was that I was going to be no good for them if I was no good to myself. And I was no good to myself up until that point. I had an inner critic whose voice was overpowering, and I felt like I was out of control in many components, mentally, emotionally, to a certain degree, physically. So it led me to an inflection point where in 2019, in fact, I hit my rock bottom. So I had forced my way out, essentially, of another toxic relationship at work, and found myself at a crossroads with my career. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of my marriage with their mother, for a variety of reasons that had kind of built up over the course of time. I was dealing with a crazy legal issue. I was beginning to hemorrhage money. It was taking a toll on my health. I mean, it was, being a movie guy, I would say it was the end of Act 2 moment. So, in that movie, you get 2/3 of the way through the script, and usually that's when the main character is at their lowest possible point. They began this journey, they had these fits and spurts, they thought they saw the light, and then all of a sudden they get knocked back down again. And this is their fork in the road moment. As far as, okay, are you going to, get back up and figure out a way to make this work? If not for yourself, at least for your children who are counting you to get your act together. Or are you going to play the victim and just allow this to be your life and allow life to dictate where you go as opposed to the opposite? So for me, it forced me to take a look inward and really figure out where I went so far off track and what I needed to do to get back on it. And the first thing was, before the career, before even improving my own parenting abilities, I needed to figure out what I could do to, if not move the needle forward, at least prevent myself from continuing to sink deeper into this abyss. And the first thing that I determined is I need to get some sort of structure to my life. I need to be doing something on a day-to-day basis that's going to allow me to have the clarity that I've been lacking to this point. I need to get out of my head and just take action. So I came up with a list of daily habits that I thought were essential to getting in the right track. And I would say most of them are not groundbreaking. I'd say the vast majority of people would say, oh yeah, well that's kind of obvious, but as obvious as it might have been, I wasn't doing them. And I venture to say many people don't. So, I mean, it ranged anywhere from getting up earlier to practicing meditation, to journaling, to exercising, having this morning routine that was set so I can do instead of just think. And initially I came up with, I believe, 24 different habits, and I ranked each one from 0 to 5 as far as how well I did. In other words, Tyler, I completely overcomplicated the damn thing. But the intention was good. And I felt like, okay, I'm on the right track here, but I need to figure out how to simplify now and streamline and not make it so complicated that it's going to psych me out. So over the course of time, I whittled that down to 10 habits. And the game changer was, instead of ranking it, I was either going to do it or I wasn't going to do it. And it didn't matter how much of it I did. It didn't even matter how long or how well. It just mattered that I was able to do something and check that off the list and keep that chain going. That was the turning point. After the course of several weeks, I would say I began to notice some small differences. Over the course of several months, I began to notice some significant differences. And it was all because I gave myself permission to do something and not criticize how well or how much of that I did. And I feel like I was also beginning to portray this role model image that I always wanted in front of my children. They were seeing me getting into this routine and this cadence. And, they would have some curiosity. I'd have my kids say, oh, what are you doing right now? Oh, well, this is called yoga. And then, you want to try. And then my kids would jump in, and it gave us an opportunity to enhance our lives together. And that was extremely rewarding for me. And hopefully they felt and feel the same way. Is any time that I can lead by example and yet do something that's helping me along the way, there's really no downside to that. So I locked that in, and 5 years later, I still have that going for myself, to the point where if I go 10 for 10, I now have enough of a sample size where if I'm not guaranteed to have a great day, I'm at least guaranteed not to have a bad one. So I've got that taken care of, which was a huge thing. And it eliminated the excuses that I always had going into these things. So for example, growing up, my father passed away at a young age. He was 39, I was only 10 years old. So I think that had served as a lot of inspiration for my own parenting abilities and approach, where for half my childhood, I didn't have that father figure. I didn't have that person to turn to, that role model to lean on. And I wanted to make sure that I could serve in that role that my father didn't have the opportunity to do for much of my childhood. But as an escapism, after my father passed away, my mother leaned into fitness. That was her outlet, a very healthy outlet, of course, to the point where she became a competitive bodybuilder and a personal trainer in her 40s. Very inspirational. Yeah. But even though we wound up having a gym in our basement and I was this aspiring athlete as a teenager, every time I would go down and try to work out with my mom, she would kick my butt. I would be sore for days, and it would not be an enjoyable experience. And worse yet, I wasn't seeing results after a couple times of doing that. Because why wouldn't I see results if I'm sore for days? I should be seeing something. That's my teenage brain. So upstairs, we had, I think, like 50 to 100 cable TV channels. I know that's nothing now, but that was enough to keep me occupied, and that was far more enjoyable in the moment. So there went the athletic aspirations for obvious reasons. I didn't put the work in, but it was also a mindset that carried on with me well into my adult life. So anytime that I would try to get into this routine of working out and getting physically fit, there would always be two inevitable excuses that I would make for myself. And it wasn't just for fitness, it was really across the board. And it was one, I don't have the time, and two, I don't have the energy. So what I did when it came to these daily habits is I made them ridiculously simple as far as the bar that I needed to reach. So for example, what if I just did one push-up? Well, I certainly have the time to do one push-up, and I better have the energy to do one push-up, or I have far bigger issues. And what would occur is that, hey, once I got that one push-up in, hey, well, I'm already here. Why don't I do a set of push-ups? All right, well, that's starting to feel good. I get the blood flowing. Maybe you do a few sets. To the point now where if I'm not working out at least 30 to 40 minutes every single day, now I feel it on the other side. I'm like, all right, something's off. I need to do that in order to get my mind and body right. So again, these types of structured systems are what I, desired to not only achieve for myself, but to ultimately and hopefully pass down to my children so they understand how essential and how impactful those types of habits can be, even at a younger age, for them to give them the momentum that they'll need entering into adulthood so they can eliminate those excuses that I had. A mentor would tell me I was able to pay the dummy tax so they don't have to. So I did all the foolish things into my childhood and transitioning into adulthood that now I can serve as a cautionary tale for my children so they can avoid those additional detours and obstacles that I had to face.
That reminds me so much of, I know Jordan Peterson said it, I think there was an admiral that addressed a college graduating class that said it, but they said, make your bed. Start every day. That's a small victory. Make your bed. Do you remember that first rung of the ladder, that first step you took from that rock bottom that made the difference? That first practical thing?
It might have been the one push-up. It might have been, because that was the one thing that I had attempted to habitualize repeatedly throughout the course of my adult life. Is I wanted to be physically fit. I wanted to be more confident in my body, in myself, and I would get that momentum going, and I'd get into a groove for a few weeks, and then something would inevitably occur. So I would get pulled away from something, or I wouldn't feel well, and then I'd miss a day, and I'd give myself the excuse that it was okay to miss a day. And then, well, I already missed a day, and then I missed the second day. And before you know it, it was months and months before I got back on the horse again. So the fact that I was able to basically make things so ridiculously simple that I eliminated those excuses was really the turning point, and allowed me to then transfer that same mentality with some of these other habits. Okay, so meditation. I'm textbook ADD, and that's something that I did not discover until well into my 20s. But then looking back, yeah, it made a lot of sense. You know, it's like, all right, well, that explains a lot of things as far as my behaviors, as far as, you know, some of the trials and tribulations that I had faced well into adulthood, all of that. But what I was able to do with meditation, for example, was, how am I supposed to sit down and just sit and not think for 15 minutes? That seemed way too daunting. But what if I just sat and observed my monkey mind for 1 minute? Okay, I didn't get down on myself if my thoughts start to wander. I accepted it and just sat in awareness. And that was another big thing, is that for most of my life, especially my adult life, I felt like life was happening to me as opposed to for me. That I was just kind of the supporting character in somebody else's screenplay. Mm-hmm. And I was just kind of darting from one place to another. And by allowing myself to just kind of sit and be aware and not judge, just be, was a huge, huge revelation for me.
Yeah, life is full of lulls and swells, peaks and valleys. Some get pretty deep, and I know when I get into some of those deep valleys where, you know, depression is part of the conversation, I start to kind of block people out, and I start to get super internal. I don't know if you do the same thing, but can you talk about the role of other people or community or the village around you, or maybe a person that inspired you via podcast or anything that kind of helped you get out of that crevice and start climbing that ladder back to building those habits back up?
Yeah, that's a great point, Tyler. So another priority that I made for myself when I was at that turning point in my life 5 years ago is that I was going to consume as much content that was going to give me the clarity that I was so desperately lacking to get me back on track. And I was going to curate that and aggregate as much as I can to turn back to and just pull out those juicy nuggets. So I consumed a lot of books on that as far as self-help. I leaned into a lot of podcasts that helped when it came to personal prioritization. And I sought out a lot of mentors. So I went through my share of coaches. And by the way, that's okay to say that I went through them, because there does need to be that alignment as far as personality, as far as an understanding of style. So because the first couple didn't work doesn't mean that coaching didn't work. It meant that there wasn't necessarily that right fit. But that was something that I knew that I, for whatever reason, you know, stubborn pride or ignorance or just not being able to see the forest from the trees, I felt like I can do it on my own. I wanted to be that masculine role. And I even felt like as a father, that was how I was supposed to be. It's that, well, I shouldn't display vulnerability. I shouldn't, be that person that's lacking or that's in need of assistance. I should be able to figure this thing out. And looking back, it was very foolish for me to think that, because no man is an island. I don't care how strong you might be, on the inside or the outside, there are going to be certain limitations that you have that it's okay for you to seek out someone that can fill that gap. And that's what I was looking for as well, is to figure out how I can fill that void, which, by the way, was inspiration for me to then pursue my own entrepreneurial endeavors from there. So once I got that personal life, really, I wouldn't say figured out, but at least on track, where there was kind of a more clear-cut vision. I wasn't putting out fires every single day. Now I can figure out, okay, now how can I get my career back on track, and figure out how I can lean into that using this inspiration, using all this information that I had accumulated that can serve as a baseline, and take it from there. So by doing that, I was able to take a step back and take stock on the different roles that I had had. And there were several. So I was a former journalist. I was a professor for a while. I went to film school, and that was always a desire and dream of mine that I just couldn't figure out how to turn into a career, but it became an expensive hobby for a while. And then I kind of pivoted into sales and marketing for the latter part of my career, ultimately in management, specifically in digital PR and reputation management, which was very looks good on paper, but as I alluded to earlier, did not pan out the way that I had hoped, where there were a lot of, for lack of a better word, unsavory activities that were happening within these environments that challenged my own moral compass, and realizing that I am still a man of integrity made me realize that the lifestyle that I was trying to pursue, to be a supportive and supporting parent, at least from a financial perspective, didn't necessarily equate to how it was compromising my own value system at the end of the day. And that was not an image that I wanted to convey to my children as I was in that, especially if I decided to stick in there. But what I had determined, looking back on all those roles, is that there was a common through line. And that common through line was storytelling. So whether it be as a journalist, a screenwriter, a teacher, a salesperson, a trainer, a manager, in all of those roles, if you don't have a compelling story that really truly resonates with your intended audience, it really doesn't matter what else you bring to the table. It's likely going to fall upon deaf ears. You could have all the bells and whistles in the world, but it's just going to go over their heads because there's no connection. And again, it's something that I've tried to transfer over to my role as a parent as well, is that if I ever feel like I'm not really getting through to my kids when I'm trying to teach them something or give them a lesson or show them why they should be doing this instead of that, incorporating a story, incorporating some sort of analogy or a metaphor to allow it to resonate has proven to be very effective in many cases. And because of that, it was further validation that I can pursue my own path in a very similar fashion, where I can help others try to tell their story and reach their intended audience and make an impact and be seen as a thought leader themselves. So whether it be as a parent or a professional, you want to be seen in a light where you're building a trust score, and you're doing so in a way where someone can be woven into the storyline that you're trying to present and feel like they're a part of it, and can relate at the end of the day.
The ability to be a conveyor of information to kids or people you work with as a great storyteller it's got to be one of the most effective ways to communicate what it is that you're trying to transfer over. And to go to talking about, no man is an island. Yeah, we're all a puzzle piece. We're all Swiss cheese. We're all looking for other people to check those boxes that we leave unchecked to become a better rounded human being, friend, husband, parent, and professional. And so as I let more people in and embrace the community around me, I'm getting more and more satisfaction out of life because all those little gaps in the Swiss cheese are getting filled in. Can you talk about how you're transforming your work or the evolution of moving from one position or job or career or industry to another played a role in your checking those boxes for yourself to increasingly satisfy all the things that you're looking to accomplish or feel?
Yeah, well, looking back, I love the mantra that we either win or we learn. So there are no losses. I can look back and really identify the teachable moments that have happened along the way. And especially as my children grow up to become adults, I think it's really going to resonate with them that much more. So when they get into their own career paths, I can, again, share with them the dummy taxes that I had paid and say, all right, well, if you're only pursuing the money, you know, it's a quick fix. And at some point, you're going to be miserable because you're not living your truest life, your truest self, and you're deviating away from where you feel like your purpose-driven passions lie. So I discovered a word probably a year or two ago that I absolutely love because it encompasses all of this. It's called ikigai. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
No.
So it's great. It's a Japanese term that's loosely translated means the intersection between your passion, your purpose, and your vocation. So it's kind of like in that Venn diagram where that sweet spot is right in the middle, where once you can identify that, that's 90% of the battle right there. It's like, okay, this is where I need to reside. I need to reside where it's something that I'm passionate about. It's something that's purposeful for me. It's something that I already have an inherent level of skill and talent with. And it's something that there is a captivated audience that's ready to get in front of for. So for me, that is the ongoing pursuit, is to really stay focused on where I can find my ikigai and where I can essentially lead by example by constantly making that the priority in my day-to-day life. So journaling, as I had mentioned, is one of my daily habits. And for many years, I just wasn't doing it, at least on a consistent basis. And talk about imposter syndrome, because I was a professional writer for so long. I was writing for everyone except myself. And, you know, it's the shoemaker's kids kind of scenario right there. And, you know, for me now, again, I keep it simple. And in the morning, I try to give myself those types of prompts as far as, okay, what is my ikigai? And it might change slightly on a day-to-day, but that's fine because we want to compartmentalize. I don't want to look too far ahead because then it becomes overwhelming, it becomes daunting, it becomes unrealistic. Because who knows what's going to happen between now and 6 months from now, a year from now. But what I do have far more control over is within the construct of this day and what I want to accomplish. And if how I set up my calendar is aligned with those priorities. So in the morning, I'll just write out, all right, what do I want to accomplish today? What impact do I want to make? Why is this important? And how is this aligned with my overall value system? And by setting that tone, then it allows me to keep my eyes on the prize and, you know, make sure that I'm not going too far off track.
Yeah, that's great. I love that ikigai concept, that word. I'm going to look into that and explore it a little bit. And I'll call that word with another word, which
Go for it.
For the life of me, I can't remember. But the word encompasses the idea that in order for someone to be inspired to action, they have to reach a certain level of discomfort. Like so many people out there, I'm sure you and me included, have sustain themselves in a certain level of discomfort, whether it's a relationship or a job, and you've gone through a lot of transitions over the last 5 years, so you can probably relate to this, where you're just kind of bebopping along in this mild level of discomfort, and it's not uncomfortable enough to change it, and then it transitions into, okay, now I'm really uncomfortable, now I have to change it, now I'm inspired to act. Have you found in your life that you have lived in mild discomfort when it wasn't the right thing and you were able to get out of that? Or did you have to get from the mild discomfort to the, like, I can't live in this circumstance anymore, therefore it must change? Do you?
Yeah, for most of my life, it was the latter.
Yeah.
I feel like I had to get to that point where the pain was so unbearable that it forced me to take action. Looking back in hindsight, obviously a foolish way of going about that, where now, because I have this newfound sense of awareness, this inner awareness where I can identify the issue before it spirals, before it exacerbates it into something that is a far greater endeavor to try to resolve. It's allowed me to become more proactive and to face it head on. So now for me, if there's some mild discomfort, I at least make an effort to identify the root of the cause and figure out what I can do to get ahead of it, to get in front of it, so it doesn't continue to build and fester inside to the point where now it's, man, where do I even start? How do I get to this? With that said, I've also learned to accept that type of discomfort if it's something that I can't necessarily control in the moment. And that's going to happen. There's going to be certain life circumstances that you just can't do anything about. And you're going to have two options with that. You can either accept it or you can suffer in it. And suffering is a choice. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And that's such a big thing that I've discovered, that the two are very different things that too often get merged together. Well, if you're in pain, you're suffering. No, you're not. You can be in pain, and nobody wants to be, but you can also accept that this is how it is in this moment, and then you can make sure that your mind is not making it worse by going into victim mode and by making projections of how it could be worse before it even is. Because then essentially what you're doing is you're making that a predestined journey. It's like, okay, be careful what you ask the universe, whether it be intentional or not, because they'll hand it right to you. And if you start going down the what if path, then before you know it, now you're at the what now path.
Yeah, one of the most obvious things to me over time has been the phrase, as you think, so shall you be. You get swept up into a river of bad thoughts, and that river will carry you as far as you want. And you have to bring yourself to some level of presence. Maybe it's grabbing a branch and taking a breath and going, all right, I got to get the hell out of this river. So you've got two kids, you've got a business that you run from home, you're doing a lot of stay-at-home dad work. What's that transition been like from going to the office to now being at home and working with your kids around more often than they have been in the past?
Generally, it's a blessing. Certainly, there are some inherent challenges that go with that you wouldn't necessarily get at the office. So, for example, when my kids are home and I'm working in my home office, they tend to believe that, well, since daddy is present, he's physically in the house, that I have carte blanche to just kind of knock on the door or walk right in and check in and talk to them. So that's still a work in progress for me to establish those boundaries and let them know, hey, even though I'm here and I know I'm only several feet away, I am working and I am, focused on the task at hand. But at this particular time, I will make sure to give you the time that you're looking for and to make sure that you feel like I'm present in that moment with you. So when I'm working, but my promise in return for you is that when I'm not working and I'm with you, I'm completely with you. And I'm not still being torn. So that balance has been really important. Obviously just being my own boss is a great thing. That again comes with its own inherent challenges because everything falls on you. And there are no scapegoats, there are no excuses. You can't pass the buck. You are the chief cook and bottle washer, if you will. So for me, that's also, it's forced me to make sure that when I am in work mode, that I need to be completely in work mode as well. But the biggest thing I would say is ensuring that there is structure and that there is balance. So for example, I have my kids every other week. That's been the cadence, which I think is important for them to have that consistency so they know what's going on week over week. It wasn't like that at first. And again, we win or we learn. And there was more of kind of the inconsistency. It was like 3 days on, 3 days off. And there was a lot of, hopping back and forth between their mom and myself. But what we're able to do is through some really effective co-parenting, which I'll say both of us have done a great job kind of staying in our lane with that, is give them expectations as far as, okay, with this week, you're at daddy's and this is his schedule and these are the house rules and these are your responsibilities and this is what, I'll be able to provide for you. And when you're with mommy, she's got her own set of rules and she's got her expectations. And even if they might not be necessarily completely aligned, that's fine. Because even when you have both parents, living together, you're going to have different parental approaches. And not that one is better than the other, or one is right or one is wrong, but I think it's helpful for children to understand that those different styles are something that they can pull from each, that they can then apply, for themselves and also for when they become parents, looking back on how they were raised. So having that, again, that consistency, just like with my daily habits, I think is really important when it comes to the parenting side of things as well. So, we are eating our own cooking, if you will.
Yeah, I completely get that, having grown up in a household where it was every other weekend and every Wednesday, and getting two completely different lifestyles on either side of those times was I think something I ultimately benefited from. I think having that balance of a masculine and a feminine influence on your kids is so important, because I know if it was just me raising my kids, it would be completely different children. If it was just my wife, they'd be completely different. I find that our roles are kind of more traditional as the decades behind us would define. So now, what do you feel like your role as a dad is to your kids? What's a dad's job? What's Jeff Glauser's as a dad job?
Be the best human being I can be. I know that's set the bar really high, but I think it's just really a matter of not overthinking that process. I don't have to necessarily consume all these, parenting books and, go through these courses. I need to trust my own abilities and what I've been able to do for myself, and realize that much of it is transferable. So the daily habits, easily transferable. It's nothing that they can't pursue themselves, even at a younger age. Being reliable, practicing what I preach, being consistent is important. And, obviously making sure that I'm present, not necessarily just physically present, but present in their lives. So if at any point they're stumbling and they're not sure where to go and they're lost, they know that they have a stable figure, a stable presence in their lives with me that's not going anywhere. So that's an important thing, is even when I don't have them physically with me on the weeks that I don't. So this week, kids are with their mom. I still check in with my daughter each day. I'll send her a text, and it could be, as simple as, how was your day? What's new? What was your biggest win today? But just something. And, sometimes she might keep it close to the vest and just give me those one-word preteen girl answers that I get. And that's fine, whatever. But other times she might open up and say, oh, check this out. Or, I took this picture, check it out and, and see what it's like. So yesterday she went to the beach and, as we talked about, and she gave me some pictures and she was like, hey, I dyed my hair pink. What do you think? And it's like, oh, it's cute, whatever. It's the summer. That's fine. Have at it. So my son doesn't have that access just yet, but I plan to do the same thing with him. Sometimes I'll get him on her phone, but just making sure that each and every day I stay front of mind, even if it's for just a minute or two. Because again, it's not that how much, nearly as much as how often and how consistent, and knowing that, hey, listen, that's the one thing that's going to remain tried and true in my life, is that my dad is going to be around in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so as we're backing in towards the end of this, I'm going to hit you with a couple of kind of rapid fire questions.
Bring it.
First, because I know you're a movie guy, I'm not going to ask you your favorite movie because that's such a hard question to ask, but give me 2 or 3 of your favorites.
Okay. So they come from a few different types of genres, so I can kind of hit all the different marks. I am a sucker for the classics, so I would say my first ever favorite movie, and maybe this speaks to me being an old soul, is It's a Wonderful Life. So I, even as a child, I felt like I could relate to George Bailey, the main character, this everyday guy that had, these grandiose dreams and visions, and then life happens and it doesn't necessarily go the way you had planned. But then looking back, when you realize how he lived his life, when he realized that, then it allowed him to put things in perspective and say, you know what? I have lived a wonderful life because I've made an impact on so many people that mattered so much to me. So I'd put It's a Wonderful Life there. Also being a media guy and being a former journalist, another one that I absolutely love that I am astounded hasn't gotten nearly as much staying power as it should have, is Network. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It came out in 1976. Fantastic movie. So the writing was incredible. It was probably about 25 years ahead of its time. Everything that we're seeing in modern media and the merger of the news and entertainment and where those lines get blurred, it's all clearly stated there. This was basically a predictor of what our modern society was going to be. So highly encourage your audience to check that one out as well too. It's quite fascinating. And then let's get a little silly there too. So if we were to throw in a comedy, my first favorite comedy I'll put in there is Airplane. So big fan of satire and slapstick and really clever language with that, and a lot of great jokes where even to this day, and it's over 40 years old, I can look back and still chuckle and even identify some hidden jokes that are baked in there as well. So there's 3 right there.
I hear they're going to do a remake of Naked Gun. If that's true, I'm so excited.
I've heard that. I think John Hamm was slated for that, and I think that'll work.
I had heard Liam Neeson.
Oh, Liam Neeson, that would work as well. Yes.
And Pamela Anderson, I guess, playing the Priscilla Presley character.
Well, that's interesting. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. But both of them are really good at playing it straight, and then getting those hearty laughs. And Leslie Nielsen was the master at that. So I hope they do it. They do it justice, because that Naked Gun's up there as well.
When Leslie did the fart machine in his interview, it kills me. All right, okay, so quick hitters.
Go for it.
What are 2 or 3 characteristics that you really want to cultivate in your kids as you prepare to present them to the world?
Great question. Purpose, conviction. So if there's something that they really want, then making sure that they commit on that path and are able to persevere. And you know what? Kindness. I think that's something that our society, our world needs more than ever these days. We're just, in a very unkind period in history right now, generally speaking. And I just want to make sure that they have the right karma going for them, and they put that out, and that there is this altruistic mindset that they live with, because that's not only is it gratifying for those around them, but it's going to be gratifying for themselves. And by having that moral compass at a high level, it's just going to set them up for so many other successes.
Awesome. I completely agree. All right, let's be rid of the constraints of time, money, and space. So you're completely open to how you answer what kind of gift you would give every father in the world. If you could snap your fingers again, money's not a thing, space isn't a thing, time isn't a thing. You can give them anything. You have the power of the infinity gauntlet. What gift would you bestow upon every father on the planet?
Give them a community. I think, again, kind of going back to one of the things we talked about before, Tyler, is I feel like sometimes there's this unintentional toxic masculinity that we have where we have to go it alone. We have to be that strong, powerful figure. We have to just, hey, I'll take it from here. I'll do all the heavy lifting. And it's such a fallacy. That's not how it works. No man is an island. No person is an island. And if we know that there's a like-minded community of people who have gone through similar experiences, similar struggles, and have figured out the secret sauce to overcome it, why wouldn't we want to tap into that? So I think it's really important for you to find your tribe and to figure out how to lean on them, how it's okay to be vulnerable, especially if it's going to seemingly counterintuitively give you the strength that you need by understanding those gaps and the inherent pitfalls that you face, and tap into that and do so unabashedly.
Awesome. I'm going to give a quick shout out to the gal behind me who loaned me this painting. It's available for sale. Her name is Kerry Molina, Kerry, Molina.com, if anyone loves that piece of art and wants to buy it. Jeff,
beautiful.
Where could people find you online? LinkedIn, social media, websites?
Sure. I tend to hover around in LinkedIn for a while. I believe I'm cornering the market on Jeff Glauser's there. I know that there are a few others out there, and mad props to them as well. Hopefully they pronounce it the same way as me. So feel free to reach out to me there. You can also reach out to me on my site if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what I do, how I can help you with your story, how I can help you with finding your tribe and being seen as a thought leader. And that site is brandscribed.com. So essentially transcribed, but with a B. Because what I'm doing is I'm transcribing your story and putting it into the words that are going to make the most possible impact with your intended audience. So check me out in either of those spots. I'd love to chat and see what I can do to help add value to you in your life.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you one last question before we sign off.
Sure.
Jeff, when do you feel the most love in your life?
I would say, and maybe this is an easy answer compared to or based on our conversation here, but it really is when I'm spending that quality time with my kids, and especially when there's some level of a revelation that occurs. So when I feel like I have my teacher's hat on and can give them that aha moment, and they say, "Thanks, Dad," or "That makes sense," and then better yet, when I see them apply it, in their day-to-day lives. That's so rewarding. It makes me feel like my voice has been heard and that I am serving a very important purpose in life that will ideally get paid forward generation over generation, perhaps.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to wrap up the recording. Thank you for being here, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tyler.